Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Georgia! What, Georgia? The Republican governor, Brian Kemp, signed into law. Well, we're going back to the Jim Crow era. Welcome back. Senate Bill 202. And now the law of the land there in Georgia. And look, no one should be surprised that the Republicans in Georgia, after the state turning blue, now doing everything they can do to suppress the vote, to ensure that Georgia will remain a Republican state, return to and remain a Republican state, because we don't want everyone voting. Voting would be bad. What they've done with this piece of legislation is what the Republican marching orders across the country are going to be. Make sure not everyone gets to vote. Make sure we make it as difficult as possible so people have to jump over hurdles. Make sure that we stick hard, fast, and firm to showing up on Tuesday and being in person. This bill is going to require a photo ID for voting absentee by mail. Going to have to go in there with your ID. They're cutting down the amount of time that you have to request an absentee ballot, and they're limiting the number of places that you can put that absentee ballot and where that can be accessible. They're also going, because, and this is the best part of this, there are a couple of really great parts to this that you just go, wow. But the fact that they have stripped the Secretary of State, and, well, I guess all local election officials as well, but they're stripping the Secretary of State of the power to be able to lead the state election board. I'm guessing this is going, if I'm reading this right, this will be a political appointee job where you can get a good partisan in there, someone who doesn't have to worry about elections. And this is all because Brad Raffensperger didn't go and find 12,000 votes somewhere for Donald Trump. That's why that is in there. But again, when you start restricting the access to the ballot box, they're restricting early voting for runoff elections, and then additional identification information for absentee voters. They're banning all mobile voting units for early voting. This is just, it's mind-blowing how far they have gone, but not surprising. They're limiting where you can drop them off, and like I said, they're removing the secure ballot drop boxes, so we just can't make this easy. No, got to make it as difficult as possible. And my favorite part of all this, because it's incredible, you're not allowed to anymore, and it's a crime this day forward in the state of Georgia to hand someone standing on line to vote anything to eat or drink. It's a crime. While those folks are standing in line for 10 hours to hand out bottles of water, it is a crime. You will go to jail in Georgia for giving someone a piece of chewing gum. This is how far it's gone. This is how angry the Republican Party is at this moment that they lost Georgia, and they're getting it back. So when I saw this, and I saw the fact that Brian Kemp signed this, and he would, because he's a good party guy. I saw this, and immediately my mind goes to, this is why we need H.R. 1. This is why we need to make voting laws in this country universal. We need to make it more open, more accessible, more transparent, and hold these kind of people accountable for what they do. So this is actually probably, in my view, in the long game, probably not a bad thing to have a southern state go back to Jim Crow era kind of treatment of minority voters, because now we have to react to this. Now the Supreme Court's going to have to react to it. Now the federal government's going to have to react to it. And there's going to have to be something done, because we know why they're doing this. It's to keep those people from voting. And those people are anyone who is old, who's poor, who is transient, any of the folks who, well, we're led to believe vote for Democrats. You know, the people who need help are the ones we're going to cut off first. And I found it interesting as Brian Kemp was giving his spiel on the live stream that a Georgia state representative, her name Park Cannon, had the audacity to knock on the door and interrupt his live stream because she thought legislators should be there in the moment that he is signing legislation. Evidently, the state police of Georgia did not feel that she should be interrupting and manhandled her in one of the, you go, that's a state representative you've just grabbed and are dragging backwards down the hall. And she didn't resist at all. She was walking along and they were dragging and jerking her and pulling her around. And I'm going, you know, to me, this is one, not a good image, not the message you want to send on the day that you're literally taking the right to vote away from many African-American voters in Georgia, to take an African-American representative and drag them, manhandle her out the door. And my first thought is they're trying to cause a riot. They're trying to incite a reaction because this isn't something that you do unless you're in Georgia. So going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, Joe Biden gave his first press conference on this topic, and, you know, he's right on this topic. He said, look, I'm going to do everything I can do to roll back, to stop this, to do something about it. He said, you know, the rolling back of voting rights, I think his words were sick and un-American. And yes, but here's the thing, and I'm going to push back on Joe Biden here. This is very American. This is what we've done for generations. No surprise here. The question is what are we going to do about it going forward? Because as I've said, I'm somebody who believes we need to open up the vote and allow citizens to vote as easily as possible. I'm in favor of instant registration. Much like we did when I was a kid, 18 years old, went down to the post office, signed up for selective service. I should have been here. You're signed up for selective service. You can go and die in the military. You can vote. To me, it's got to be that easy. And for me, this last cycle of mail-in voting, I said, look, I don't want to go stand in line. I don't want to get sick or anything like that. Send me a ballot. They mailed it to me. Got an email saying, hey, did you get it? Yeah, got it. I took it out of the envelope. Really nice envelope. I filled it out. I put it back in a nice envelope, the carrier envelope. I signed that envelope. Or I put it in the mailing envelope, signed the back of it, right across where you open it. So it wasn't tampered with. And I mailed it in. I dropped it off at the mailbox and mailed it in. Got an email the next day, said, hey, we got it. You're good. When they counted it, said, hey, we got it. We counted it. All good. Hand-marked paper ballot can be recounted over and over again. They knew who I was. They knew. It was all there. The most transparent way possible. I don't know why we can't do that for everyone. I don't know why we can't make this easier. But, it's Georgia. And we're going to see a lot of other states doing the same thing because all of this stuff here is here where I live in Pennsylvania. It's banging somewhere around. The Republicans have gotten their ALEC kind of legislation, their model legislation that they're all going to slap their name on. And this is where we're going. And it's sad. But today, Joe Biden had his first press conference. And the Republicans were all excited. Oh, my goodness. The press releases and the pre-made up, comments that the RNC was making. Oh, they were so happy today. Because Joe Biden didn't do well, I don't think. He came out. He gave, very straight answers, very short answers. He wasn't bloviating. He wasn't Trump. There was no crazy off the wall comments. There was no, hey, we should just shove bleach up people's behinds. There was none of that stuff. He answered the questions, but you could see as I'm watching him, you can see the wheels turning in his head, going, I can't make a gaffe. I can't say something stupid. I can't stutter. And he was really, you could see he was working, and that made the right wing very, very happy. They were all tingly in the panties. Oh boy, we get to say that he's weak. I don't care what kind of press conference he does. I care about the policy that he pushes. And the fact that, again, he highlighted the fact that working people in this country have been getting screwed for too long, and that his administration is about helping working people lead better lives and helping people to join and form unions. That, to me, was the most important part of it. The fact that his policies and the work that he's doing is moving us in the right direction. I'm all right there. Now, the border came up, obviously. I disagree with his position on not allowing cameras in or people in until they have their policies in place. I think day one, they should have brought in all camera crews and say, look at this mess that we've been left. It's what I would have done. And look, everybody can play armchair quarterback, but what I would have done is day one, I would have brought camera crews through. This is what we were left. This is what we've inherited from the last administration. This is the mess that they've created. We got to clean it up. And understand, in this moment, Joe Biden is cleaning up 40 years of Republican policy, 40 years of horrible supply-side voodoo Reaganomics, 40 years of, to be honest, some Democratic problems too, the neoliberal nonsense and all of that, absolutely. But this is 40 years of creating an economy and a country that panders to the very wealthy at the expense of the people who work for a living. And I am thrilled that Joe Biden is seeing clearly what every working person in this country has been going through for the last 40 years and is attempting to do something about it. But I'll tell you, the border thing should have been high on the list of look at what we got. Now he's put Kamala Harris in charge of dealing with the border, and it's a good thing. You need somebody you trust that's going to be hammering at that. But ultimately, it's Congress's failure. I wish people would take the questions that they threw at him and ask Congress, why haven't you passed legislation that's going to help the president? Why haven't you passed legislation that's going to give some direction? Why is it that it's this guy's mess? Now, interestingly enough, not one question about the virus. And that was bizarre to me. I was expecting a little virus talk. I was expecting someone to, bring up something. You know why? You know why it didn't come up? Because he's doing really well. I mean, they're doing a good job. You can't get clickbait. You can't clickbait. You can't get sound bites of, you've done well. Doing well doesn't sell. What they want is they want to see where you're falling down. They want to see where you're failing. They want to cause that division, that tension. Filibuster came up, and they want Joe Biden to say, "Oh, I want it one way or another." They want him to go, "Oh, we got to do something." Joe Biden doesn't have a dog in this fight. It's the Senate that has to make that choice. Now he can make his opinions known, and he said, "Look, we got to do something." He agreed that what President Obama said, that it's a relic of the Jim Crow era, as I think all of us should understand. But he's saying, look, let's deal with the abuses first. Let's figure out how we move forward. And, maybe, who knows? He said, look, I'm not the parliamentarian. It's not my expertise. Let the Senate do their job, which was the right answer. Also on the Afghanistan, he was asked about that. Are we getting out by May 1st? He says he finds it hard to believe that's going to happen. It's going to be a hard deadline to meet. He doesn't believe that it's going to be a year. We'll see where that goes. Also on North Korea, he said, look, I agree with President Obama. North Korea is our number one foreign policy threat, and it's something we've got to deal with. Right there with him. I would argue that China is way up on the list, and the fact that China and Russia are getting a little cozy, I'm leaning toward that being a massive problem. But if North Korea gets a nuke, I don't know. I think we should be a little worried about that. And there were a bunch of other things in the press conference that I spent some time going through. And look, it was exactly what I expected. He came out, he answered the questions. There was really nothing of note, nothing outrageous. Now, the right's going to tell you he looked weak and he was feeble. I saw a guy who was trying not to screw up. I saw a guy who, to be honest, if it's me in his situation, that I've got to worry about how the entire country is going to react to my every word, I would have a much more difficult time than sitting here and say, well, I would always answer it this way. Because here, I'm just a guy on the radio. That response heard all across the world. So I get why he was stumbling a little bit and why he was measured in his words. Now, the absolute dumbest question. And this is one of those things where immediately this woman should have her press pass revoked. She should be off the White House press corps. She should never be allowed to look at the White House again. That's how stupid this question was. They should put her in the garden section of whatever publication CBS News has. The fact that she works at CBS News is just mind-blowing to me. Her name's Nancy Cortez. She had the... Understand, Joe Biden has been president now for 64 days. And she asked whether he plans to run for and expects to run for re-election. He's literally 2 months into his term. Literally at the beginning of this term. And you're asking about next? There are a lot of problems right now. The virus, the economy, getting something through an infrastructure bill through the Senate, getting, I don't know, anything else done but thinking about re-election. And yet that was her number one question. That was she waited all day to ask that. All day. She went to the White House. Oh boy, I'm going to ask a question. First press conference. Oh boy. And you're going to ask something stupid like that? I'm not saying she should be fired. I'm saying she should be moved to the garden section. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, ProAct. Let's talk about that right back after this.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day Centralia Coal Mine Number 5 exploded, killing 111 miners in Centralia, Illinois. The explosion occurred just as the day shift was ending. Those not killed instantly were trapped and died from their burns or the afterdamp. Words scrawled on the wall of the mine read, "Look in our pockets. We all have notes. Please give them to our wives." State inspectors had been forewarning mine owners about the dangers of accumulated combustible coal dust for years before the explosion, but were ignored. Illinois Mine Inspector Driscoll Scanlon had been filing reports since 1942 about deteriorating conditions. The demand for coal during wartime had increased production at the expense of safety. In the aftermath of the explosion, John L. Lewis, president of the United Mine Workers of America, called a work stoppage in memory of the dead miners. He also held Secretary of the Interior Julius Krug guilty of criminal negligence. Lewis accused Krug of having failed to enforce existing mine regulations. In response, Krug ordered that 518 mines remain closed for inspection. The House and Senate proceeded to organize hearings on mine safety. They demanded that the Bureau of Mines continue to pass inspection findings on to the proper state agencies. Given the power mine owners had at the state level, these instructions ensured no improvements in mine safety would occur. It would be another 22 years before any real change occurred at the federal level.
It happened an hour ago, way down in this tunnel of coal. The gas caught fire from somebody's lamp, and the miners are choking in smoke.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday I had the audacity to say that every day in a union workplace is equal pay day, which then outraged the folks who thought that, well, by having unions would somehow take their ability to get cheated away from them. And they were very angry about it. And I had a number of people reach out to me and say, no, I don't want to be an employee. I don't want the PRO Act passed because it's going to make me go work for somebody. And it's going to make me do all these things and take my rights and my freedom. And I said, my canned response is always, well, your freedoms have been pretty much taken away because they're cheating you as you speak. And somehow you're okay with that. But it got me thinking. There's some things the PRO Act, I think, does. And there's some things I think it doesn't do, and here to share some thoughts on what it will and what it won't do. I've asked Brandon Magner to come talk with us. He's a labor lawyer, also a writer over at All Things Labor. Labor Law Light is the blog. You can get that at brandonmagner.substack.com. Brandon, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Rick.
That's a mouthful to get out. Let me make sure people have the ability to get to your site because I think it's important that they read. It's brandonmagner.substack.com, right?
Yes, I think that's right. It's just a blog on Substack.
All right, just want to make sure that we get there because you've done some really great writing on the PRO Act, and there's a lot of fear because I think we've gone a generation without people understanding what labor unions do and what they don't do. And one of the fears that some have reached out who are very happy with their self-employment, they're very happy being their own boss and working gig to gig. They think that it's the end of their existence if this were to pass. Is it the end of their existence?
No, Rick, it's not. What the PRO Act does is, with this specific provision in the PRO Act that we're talking about, is it would install the ABC test for determining who is an employee and who is an independent contractor. It basically makes the test assume a default of employment status you have to satisfy the A, B, and C prongs to be an independent contractor instead of the old test, which is the common law test, which says it's basically a jump ball, whether you're an employee or an independent contractor, which, as we know, Republicans at the NLRB have often used loopholes to say that you're an independent contractor, even when it defies all logic, such as Uber drivers. They say that those are independent contractors. FedEx drivers, those are independent contractors. And it's important because the NLRA says in its very first section since 1935 that it's the official policy of the U.S. government that it's to encourage collective bargaining, the spread of collective bargaining. That's the official U.S. policy. So it makes sense when employees are the only ones who get those rights under the NLRA in Section 7, it makes sense then to assume employment, right? We want as many people to have these rights as possible. But it does not override whatever business gig that you already have going unless you personally want to form a union yourself with your coworkers. And that's important because the NLRB doesn't go into workplaces like OSHA and do inspections for labor law violations. They don't seek out their own unfair labor practice charges. You have to file a charge with the NLRB to start that legal machinery. So the NLRB isn't overnight. If they pass this PRO Act tomorrow with the ABC test in it, they're not going to immediately go to every independent contractor and evaluate on the merits, are you an employee or an independent contractor? They're going to only wait for the people who have issues with their workplace to bring charges to them. So it's a voluntary mechanism. People who fashion themselves as small business owners, to me, aren't the kind of people who are looking to form unions anyway. They call themselves small business owners for a reason. They don't view themselves as workers, really. So these are the kind of people who really have nothing to worry about in terms of, am I going to be in a union overnight? And I would probably disagree with them that a union wouldn't help them. But it's not something where like overnight the entire freelance journalism industry becomes unionized.
But here's the thing: I know a lot of freelance journalists who want to work for somebody because they get health care, they get retirement, they get a whole bunch of things that as a gig employee they're now responsible for, and they're foregoing because the wages that they're being paid are pathetic, and they don't have the bargaining power to demand higher wages. I know a lot of people love to think, I'm going to go out there and make my own deal. But a whole bunch of people making their own deal leads you to a race to the bottom. And I look at the trucking industry as the prime example, because we've been doing the independent contractor model in the trucking industry for decades now. And what it's led to is a return to sweatshop on wheels. And I don't think most people kind of get that. When deregulation happened, there were like 16,000 trucking companies in the U.S. We're up to something like 5 million now. And that's 5 million little guys with their one truck competing with everybody else, and the wages and the conditions getting worse and worse and worse. So for me, the idea, any way we can raise those standards is where I want to go. And the PRO Act seems to be, in my view, a help in that direction.
Yeah, I think you hit on exactly why this discussion is important, because I think it's become dominated by these people online who use Twitter a lot and are freelance writers, and I guess that's their medium. But really, this act is designed for what you're talking about, the misclassified trucker, the misclassified construction worker in the South, who's doing the same work as a unionized worker in the Bronx, but they're an independent contractor in the South because that's what their employer is trying to do, not pay them benefits, not pay them certain wages, and of course to keep out unionization, because independent contractors cannot access Section 7 of the NLRA to join together with their coworkers. So really, misclassification is kind of synonymous with union avoidance. In that
let me ask you about that for a second, because I'm looking at the future, and the future to me looks like more gig employment. And as someone who knows a little bit about the building trades, I know those guys, they work for multiple employers throughout the year. They have their bargain is you use these workers. This is the wage. This is the hours. These are the conditions. This is the job. These are the conditions, and all of the contractors sign on. And an employee can work for several of them. They're basically gig workers. Is there a way to change the NLRA to allow for people who want to be gig workers to be able to then collectively bargain, so that the majority of them have some bargaining power in setting conditions for their industry?
Well, Rick, that mechanism's already there, available. The hiring halls are already legal under the NLRA. Construction workers, unionized construction workers already predominantly operate under that model. And I think that's a great model going forward for gig workers in Uber. Journalists, operating out of a hiring hall, if they want to go work for, 20 different websites instead of one, then, it would make sense to have portable benefits between those websites. The ABC test just makes it easier to identify who are the employees and who are the ones being misclassified, because it assumes employee status, which makes sense.
Now, you've brought up the ABC test a couple of times. For folks who don't know what the ABC test is, walk me through the three things that has to be in place in order for someone to be considered an independent contractor or an employer. I mean, one of them obviously is you're able to set your own hours. The other one is, as I understand it, that you are directing your work. You're not supervised by anyone. And the third one is that it's not something that the employer would be hiring someone for. You don't have the ability to, if you're running a warehouse, to have 100 independent contractors working in your warehouse, stocking shelves. That to me is those are the three. Am I right there?
No, you nailed it. Good. Off the top of your head, that's great. I think that's exactly right. I mean, when we think of an independent contractor, it's somebody like if you have like a business office or something, and you have a plumbing issue, and you hire a plumber to come in to do one job. He comes in and fixes it. But your main business that you're running is not a plumbing business. So the plumber coming in isn't taking work away. I mean, by hiring that plumber, you're not keeping work away from people you could be hiring as employees. So I think the good example is when you see a unionized factory, when they have like maintenance work, a unionized maintenance unit, and then they lay off all the maintenance workers to bring in subcontractors to do the exact same work. That's the exact kind of situation we're trying to crack down on with misclassifying, because those are the people they do the exact work that the company is in the business of. And it's a way to to stop that race to the bottom that you're talking about, because employers have a lot of incentive to misclassify, and that's what we have to battle against. Is that's where the law leads them. They don't have to pay benefits, they don't have to pay certain wages, and they can avoid unionization among those independent contractors.
No, as they shift from employees to independent contractors, they don't have to pay workers' comp, unemployment, state, local, federal taxes. They don't have to pay any of that, health care, retirement, any of that stuff. That stuff is either borne by the taxpayer or by the person who's the quote unquote independent contractor. And the other part of the graft here is, and I've had conversation with Uber drivers who have said, the reason I'm an Uber driver is not because I need the money. Have you met an Uber driver who drives the Ubers because they need money? I've yet to meet one. It's all I needed something to do. Or my favorite, it's a great tax cheat because they're able to write off their mileage. And the one guy was very clear. He goes, the only reason I'm doing this is I get to write off all my mileage. Does that sound even reasonable?
Reasonable, like this should be something that our country encourages, like for millions of jobs? No, I don't think so. I think it creates bad incentives for employers and bad incentives for workers to go and seek out these kind of jobs that, I think you made a good point about the taxes that aren't borne by, the payroll taxes that aren't paid to the state. This is why it's a public policy issue, because it deprives the state of hundreds of millions of dollars that, they otherwise would have to be used for, all sorts of policies that could benefit, working people. And that's all, when you have the independent contractor model, that just disappears.
Yeah. See, now here's the thing, and I'll be honest with you, Brandon. I'm somebody who comes from the trucking industry. I watched firsthand an industry that paid superior wages with superior benefits and good working conditions in the late 80s and early 90s. I watched as deregulation destroyed what my grandparents' generation built, which was a solidly middle-class lifestyle for working people. And I watched the conditions deteriorate. I watched unions get busted because companies were using independent contractors and basically pitting people against each other. And I see this going forward in every industry. If it worked there, this seems to be where corporate America is training us to think that we're all our own little businesses, we're our own little LLCs, and we're all going to go, do our own thing. But it's going to be at their direction because, you ask any truck driver. The person that they work for tells them where they got to go and where they got to be and when they got to be there. And some of them, you brought up FedEx, tells you what you have to wear, what color truck you got to drive, all of this stuff. So, again, we're moving down this weird spot because I can envision a moment where Amazon owns everything. They have no employees. Everyone's an independent contractor, but you still got to drive their vehicle and wear their clothes and obey the Amazon rule. But you're your own boss.
Yeah, I mean, FedEx is just, to me, it's the quintessential example because it's a very powerful, rich employer who's been able to fight that independent contractor model where it's been challenged for years, for decades. And there's really zero difference between a UPS driver does and what a FedEx driver does. The only difference is that FedEx calls you an independent contractor while UPS was unionized 80 years ago and can't do that. They can't unilaterally do that. And this is why we need to change the test for employee status versus independent contractor status, because when a Republican administration comes into power, FedEx and other employers like that appeal to the board. They'll seize on, they call it entrepreneurial opportunities, what the buzz phrase is that they like to use. But they say that, they get to own their own truck. So therefore, it's basically a small business. Therefore, they're truly an independent contractor. Yeah. While the ABC test would not, it ignores that completely. It would ask, hey, are you doing work that is the primary business model of the employer? Yes. Okay. Well, then you're an employee.
It's that simple. But yeah, you got to own your own truck and you get to maintain it, put fuel in it, pay the tolls, the taxes, all the preventative maintenance. When it breaks down, you're responsible for the downtime and the repair. Yeah, you're your own boss. Congratulations. You get all of the risk and responsibility without making the profit that the company's making. And somehow they've sold us on this. That's the amazing part. Now, look, this all came about because a guy yesterday, an accountant, said that the third part of this, the part of the business, otherwise they'd have to hire someone. That was just outside the bounds for him, because when he has peak seasons, he brings in people to help. When he's got projects, he brings people in to help. And I'll be honest with you, Brandon, I really don't care about the accountant. I think they have sufficient skills to be able to bargain their way for decent things. And I know that's dividing us a little bit. But I'm okay with them, being independent contractors. My problem is I look at the working class folks who don't have that kind of bargaining power, who are just getting screwed by the system we're in.
Absolutely. I don't think that this law should be made for accountants, lawyers, dentists, whatever. It should be made for the people who, for years, millions and millions of people across the country who are misclassified and don't have individual bargaining power, which they're forced into because they can't unionize, to better their conditions. I mean, it's you're mentioning the truckers. I mean, it's the port drivers in California, on the coasts, who are just, in horrible conditions, but they own their rig. And it's just like, and I think I've read, it's just like a ruinous industry.
What's worse about that, they don't even own it. They lease it from the company that they work for, and the company fines them to no end. In fact, we were down in Savannah, Georgia, talking to port drivers a couple of years ago, and a guy showed me his paycheck for 9 cents. Because they had fined him and taken costs, all kinds of things. He worked 80 hours, got 9 cents. And you go, how's this possible? But this is what's been allowed to happen with our broken labor law. So last line of questioning I've got for you. What are the chances of getting something like this through? I've been saying I'd love to see it attached to the infrastructure plan if we can get that through. But your thoughts?
My thoughts are it's a better chance than any previous decade where we saw labor law reform go down, in defeat, because it seems like Democrats are actually getting serious. And Biden gave a presentation today about it at his press conference, about gutting the filibuster. The filibuster has every time labor law reform has ever even seemed to have a chance, it's always been the filibuster has kept it from going anywhere. And that doesn't mean, Democrats are going to save us or anything, but it's the math is that they do have 50 votes. They have 45 people already signed on to it. It's a question of, with those 5 people, will they join that, or are they going to let it go down in defeat again? I think, a strange observation is that, the PRO Act has a ton of radical measures in it that, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, in the early years of Taft-Hartley would have never came up for a vote. Things like repealing the secondary boycott ban, repealing the ban on or banning the use of permanent striker replacements. Those are major changes to the law. And I think the reason why it's kind of sneaking by, where it seems like, it passed the House without any real debate on that stuff, is because people these days just have no idea what that stuff is anymore. Yeah. Who knows what a secondary boycott is anymore? I don't.
I do.
I do, but nobody else, I can't go talk on the street with someone and be like, Hey, did you see the secondary boycott ban? It's going to be repealed from Taft-Hartley, and they're going to look at me.
For me, repealing Taft-Hartley is the goal, and always has been for me. But Brandon, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you. I hope people will check out Labor Law Light. You can get there at brandonmagner.substack.com. We'll get links out. Brandon, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick. And solidarity.
Good stuff, brother. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. It was one of the most tragic days in U.S. labor history. 146 mostly Jewish and Italian women died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City. The death toll was so high because exits were blocked or locked, and basic safety precautions were not taken in the sweatshop. Trapped by the flames, some women chose to leap out the windows to their death. Bodies fell from the sky with such force that the sidewalk cracked below. In the aftermath of the tragedy, labor organizers and social reformers pushed for workplace safety reforms. The public reacted with grief and horror at what had occurred. Moses Rosenfeld, who was known as the poet laureate of the slums and sweatshop, captured this grief in a poem he published in Yiddish on the front page of the Jewish Daily Forward 4 days after the fire. Part of the translated poem read, "Sisters mine, oh my sisters, Brethren, hear my sorrow. See where the dead are hidden in dark corners, where life is choked from those who labor. Oh, woe is me, and woe is to the world. On this Sabbath, when an avalanche of red blood and fire pours forth from the God of gold on high. As now my tears stream forth unceasingly, over whom shall we weep first? Over the burned ones, over those beyond recognition, over those who have been crippled or driven senseless or smashed. I weep for them all. Now let us light the holy candles and mark the sorrow of Jewish masses in darkness and poverty. This, our funeral. These, our graves, our children. The beautiful, beautiful flowers destroyed. Our lovely ones burned. Their ashes buried under a mountain of caskets. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like New York State today has finalized a deal where they're going to legalize recreational marijuana in the state. They're claiming possibly a $4.2 billion industry. They're talking that it could create tens of thousands of new jobs and could be one of the largest markets in the country for the flowery plant. And it could help their tax base and could divert a whole bunch of attention in other places. Pharmaceutical companies, I don't know they're going to be all that thrilled. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on that, on what's going on in New York, and also Bernie Sanders is reminding us that the pharmaceutical industry is still ripping us off. I've asked our good friend Helaine Olen to come talk with us. Helaine's an opinion writer over at the Washington Post. She's also the author of the bestseller, The Pound Foolish book, and also the Index Card, which are great books. Helaine, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
So your state of New York, we're going pro pot.
Finally. I mean, to be truthful, I'm not sure the average person's going to notice much of a difference because it's been so prevalent for the past few years, but it will be finally legalized, and the state will probably collect over $300 million in taxes as a result over the next couple of years, as opposed to that money all just getting siphoned off into the underground economy, which is a good thing. It is partly connected to COVID, obviously. The state desperately needs money. This is what happens when you shut down for a year to combat COVID. It's also probably connected to the fact that our governor, who was a fairly strong opponent of this for a very long time, is in what the pundits like to call a weakened position at this point, and is beset by one scandal after the other. Yeah. And either both doesn't quite have the leverage that he used to have to keep things like this from happening for all sorts of complicated and not complicated reasons. And also because it distracts I suspect, hopes from the scandals. The deal that was struck today, well, I think it probably would have been struck today in any case, happened to serve to distract from a real doozy, which is the fact that yesterday, both the Post and the Albany Times Union, more or less simultaneously, revealed that the state of New York had apparently set up a special parallel VIP COVID testing system in March of 2020. So when I had COVID and basically was told, you're not at death's door, don't even try to get a test, the friends, relatives, people who live in penthouses who don't appear to have a clear connection to New York State government were getting personal visits from New York State employed nurses and at least one doctor. Their samples were being given to the New York State troopers, who were apparently racing them, we don't know if the sirens were on or not, up to a lab in Albany where they would get their results within hours, which is really kind of stupendous because to this day, you have to pay several $100s to get your results within several hours. And, this just goes on top of scandal after scandal. As I think people here know, Cuomo's now been accused of various sexual harassment / malfeasance by 9 women. He's under investigation by both the state and the federal government for an order he gave last March, which said elderly people with COVID back to nursing homes. This probably contributed to New York's fairly high death toll, which is the second largest per capita in the United States from COVID. And instead of being upfront about it, someone in New York State basically cooked the books, refused to turn the numbers over to the federal government when asked. There's now a massive investigation by the FBI. There's also, by the way, an impeachment inquiry into Cuomo that has been endorsed by both New York Senators Gillibrand and Schumer, majority of the state's congressional delegation, and the majority of the state's legislators. The only people who seem to want him to stick around at this point are the public, though the poll numbers on that are starting to fall too, because as more and more comes out, I think it's becoming clear he's not exactly Al Franken here.
Yeah,
which is what he's trying. And I should preface this by saying Cuomo would like you to think he's Al Franken, that he's being pushed out over some dubious sexual harassment charges. And by the way, I don't mean that to sound like the charges against Franken were dubious. They were not. But, that has become the public perception of them. And so Cuomo's sort of going for the same thing, that, this is just this totally illegitimate thing. And these women all misunderstood what happened. And this isn't really what happened. And, I'm not guilty of anything and I'm not going anywhere.
Well, he's guilty of being the dirtbag everyone knew he was.
Right.
I just don't see this rising to the level of him resigning over that, because no one's shown me where he's done this and then taken that next step to harm their career or do something else. Now, for me, he should have to resign or be impeached over how badly he bungled, what was going on with the COVID and all of that. But, being a playboy dirtbag who isn't doing all of the things that would harm someone's career, I don't know. You ask somebody if you can kiss them, they say no, and you don't, and you leave. I don't know if that's wrong.
I think the weird thing about this is, and we still don't truly know exactly what went on, right? I mean, if you're
I'm waiting for the investigation.
But my position has been for a while that this isn't really all that's going on by a long shot, kind of what you're saying, that this is in a way being weaponized. Now, essentially, Cuomo governed New York in a sort of bully meets political boss style for the past 10 years. Has been just terrible to many, many people. Made a deal that Republicans could run the state Senate, which, among other things, kept Andrea Stewart Cousins, who's now the head of the state Senate, Democratic, out of power for years, a Black woman, by the way. And this is, of course, part of why the marijuana stuff has been so delayed, right? So Cuomo could say, well, I'm in favor of it, while he engineered a deal where things like that could never pass, so that he could claim he was progressive, but not actually have to do anything progressive, which apparently he thought was going to get him into the White House. Clearly, that's no longer happening.
Good.
But what is going on here, though, is, from my take, and I think a take that is widely shared in New York political circles, is essentially this is turning into the political version of Murder on the Orient Express, where everybody's coming forward to stick a knife in him because he's made an awful lot of enemies over the past 10 years, legitimately so from the enemy's perspectives. I mean, they have real reasons to have grievance with this guy.
I don't doubt it.
He's, indulged massive corruption of all sorts. He's kept New York, from various gains. And it's really become, he's refused. A part of the marijuana thing is probably yet another attempt to not raise taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers, which is frankly something that is long overdue. And this is becoming the sexual harassment, I think, while probably quite legitimate, was also being used as a way to potentially get him out quicker without going through an entire process. Because one of the issues that has gone on is we don't traditionally think of New York City as a news desert, and it isn't in the traditional way. We still have a bunch of different papers. We have 2 tabloids. We have the New York Times still. But the fact of the matter is the New York Times does not particularly cover state government very well. The New York Times, the New York Daily News, and the New York Post combined have the same number of reporters in Albany as Politico. The Albany Times Union has more than all of them. as more than Politico. Not surprisingly, by the way, Cuomo's not particularly popular upstate, which is kind of interesting. But I think what I'm pointing to is that he benefited from the fact that he became governor about 10 years ago at a time when local news coverage was dying. 20 years ago, the tabloids had a circulation of about 1 million. Even 10 years ago, they had a circulation of several 100,000. And I mean like 500,000, 600,000, 700,000 as recently as 2007, 2008. So I guess 12 years ago, right? Today, it's under 200,000 each. I mean, the amount of cut because of what's happened to the newspaper industry. Right. So the result is an area that New York City residents would have traditionally known a lot about, New York State government. They don't. And the ignorance is astonishing. To give one very quick example, most New Yorkers, and when I say New Yorkers being the true New York City resident I am, I of course mean New York City residents. I'm sorry for the rest of you, had no idea that the MTA is run by the state government. So when they complain about the subways and say F de Blasio, actually it has nothing to do with de Blasio, right, the mayor of New York. It's all Cuomo, who effed up the subways 7 ways to Sunday. And among other things, when somebody very competent, a guy named Andy Byler, was hired to fix it, the guy quit after about 2.5 years because Cuomo backstabbed him so much. He said he literally couldn't do his job. So, but nobody realizes that because there's simply the news coverage simply does not penetrate. So it seems like it's penetrating because you'll go on Twitter and you'll see a hashtag that says Cuomo's MTA, and you'll think, oh, everybody must know about this, right? Well, most of the world isn't on Twitter and they don't have a clue.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. So if I'm getting your justification, he should go down for all of the harassment because he's horrible and he's done all of this other stuff that he's not being.
I think he should go down for the nursing home stuff.
I think he should.
And I think everything else is piling on. And in fact, all of this really starts and originates with the nursing home scandal. Here's a point of fact. Lindsay Boylan, the first woman who came forward to say that Cuomo harassed her, came forward in December. She got next to no attention. She only got attention after the nursing home scandal broke. And the nursing home scandal, I should say, was one of those things. And this points to sort of the correct way to get somebody out who is malfeasant that has been on a slow boil for months, right? It was known by mid to end of April that this was occurring. Janice Dean, an anchor at Fox News, has really been on it because her in-laws died in, I think, a Long Island nursing home, if I'm not mistaken. Definitely a New York nursing home. She has been on it. I was certainly talking to people about it by mid-May. I know because there were protests in the nursing home in my neighborhood. Isabella, which has the highest death count in New York at a nursing home, for the record. Yay, Washington Heights. And this was slowly percolating. I would say some of what has undercut Cuomo's support, especially as the scandal has become better known, is that, elderly people aren't that happy when their lives are treated rather cavalierly. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that when the nursing home story finally broke into the public consciousness, which was with, the Ron Kim, who's the New York State Assembly person, whose uncle died in a nursing home. And, he started to reveal some of the details of the federal investigation. That was, I'm backing off for a second. I screwed this one up. So what happened is there's a report that comes down that says, from the state that says a lot more people died than we realized. The state corrects the numbers. Ron Kim goes on the offensive. Cuomo threatens him and he goes public. He's furious because his uncle dies in the nursing home. And this is what really sets it off. So this suddenly becomes a huge story in New York City. In a way, nothing Cuomo has been, besides the COVID, has been a huge story in New York City for a decade. And literally the next day, I get a call from my dad, who after 10 years says to me, "You were right about that Cuomo guy."
So again,
I'm not allowed to tell you how old my dad is, by the way. He doesn't like to admit it. So
like I said, look, those are things I'm 100% on board with. He screwed that up. He should be held accountable for it. This just seems to be a well-coordinated, well-timed series of releases that look like a hit job.
Agree. I think what's going on is very classic at this point. People were really scared of him. And I think people can't underestimate how much that was a factor for a really long time. And the dam kind of broke open, first with Lindsey Boylan coming forward, but really when Ron Kim, who's not an unpowerful state assembly person, stepped forward and said, this is unacceptable. And now you're seeing, as I put it, it's Murder on the Orient Express. Everybody's stepping forward with their knife and their grievance. If you've never seen Murder on the Orient Express, spoiler, everybody kills the bad guy, okay? And they stick a knife into him and they go, because you did this to my sister. And then another person comes forward and says, because you did this to my nephew. And this goes on for about 5 minutes because there's about 10 people in on the plot. And that's essentially what's happening to Cuomo. And this is now drip, drip, drip every day. And actually, I think this is most likely going to be somehow, whether he's actually forced out or he simply does not run for a fourth term, which I do not believe he will at this point, is what's going to finally do it in. Because as long as he stays in office, it's going to stay like this. Because after 10 years, there's a lot of stuff that's probably going to come forward.
No, I'm sure there's a lot of skeletons in a lot of closets and a lot of these stories to come. And look, I was never a fan of his from the beginning. It's one of those things where I have no love lost in this game. It just seems really well coordinated. But it is what it is. I wanted to get you. I brought you on to talk about your piece on Sanders and the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay.
With pot.
Sanders. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Bernie Sanders is once again taking on the pharmaceutical industry. He introduced a bunch of bills on Tuesday. One that would set prices in the States to 5 countries, our peers, Canada, the UK, Germany, Japan, and France. Another that would allow Medicare Part D to negotiate. We're like the only first world country that doesn't negotiate for drugs with the pharmaceutical companies. So surprise, surprise, what do you know? We pay over 200% more than the next country down. I mean, it's really, who knew, right? Pharmaceutical companies are greedy. And, he's hoping to push these through on the next reconciliation. Whether that'll happen or not is to be determined. My guess, if I had to guess, is probably not, but that we'll get some form of some negotiation on some drugs with Medicare, which the pharmaceutical companies will, accept, not happily, but will accept. And that maybe that will drift from there because, of course, it's really not fair that only Medicare gets a break and private insurance doesn't.
Right.
Because even if your insurance picks up your prescription, you're still paying for it in the form of higher premiums, higher deductibles, and narrower networks. Our system is effed.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's pretty much it. And that's a good place to finish this. I hope Bernie gets something through and we stop getting effed on our drugs.
I completely agree.
I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Our good friend Helaine Olen. I'll make sure you check her opinion pieces over at the Washington Post. We'll get links on how you can take a look at that. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911, marking one of the most tragic days in U.S. labor history. 146 women and girls died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The Triangle Factory was owned by Max Blanc and Isaac Harris. They ran the sweatshop on the 8th and 9th floor of a building in Manhattan. Most of their employees were young Italian and Jewish European immigrant workers who did not speak English. The Triangle owners disregarded safety precautions and even went so far as to lock their employees in the building during the day. On that fateful Saturday, the workday was drawing to a close, and the women were preparing to leave. A fire broke out in a rag bin and spread quickly. The women ran to the stairway, only to find the doors blocked and locked. Tragically, only one elevator was working. Firefighters arrived on the scene, but their ladders and hoses were too short to reach the women. One survivor, Celia Walker Friedman, recalled the horror of the fire. The door to the stairway was completely blocked by big crates of blouses and goods. She escaped by sliding down an elevator cable. Desperate women tried to jump down the elevator's shaft and out the windows. Horrified onlookers watched as these women fell to their deaths. In the aftermath of the fire, the International Lady Garment Workers Union organized an official day of mourning. A march to honor the dead and demand changes in the industry drew 80,000 to the streets of New York. The owners faced criminal charges, but were not convicted. They settled civil suits, paying only $75 for each woman who died. The fire became a rallying call for union organizing and workplace safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
In corporate speak, there are no, quote, job cuts. Instead, firings are blandly referred to as employment adjustments. Now, though, corporate wordsmiths will need a whole new thesaurus of euphemisms, for masses of job cuts are coming for employees in the higher echelons of the corporate structure. Don't look now, but an unanticipated result of the ongoing pandemic is that it has given cover for CEOs to speed up the adoption of highly advanced RPAs, robotic process automation, to replace employees once assumed to be immune from displacement. As one analyst told a New York Times reporter, with RPA, you can build a bot that costs $10,000 a year and take out 2 to 4 humans. Prior to the COVID crisis, many top executives feared a public backlash if they pushed automation too far too fast. But ironically, the economic collapse caused by the pandemic has so discombobulated the workplace and diverted public attention that corporate bosses have been emboldened to rush ahead. While the nationwide shutdown of offices and furloughing of employees has caused misery for millions, one happy purveyor of RPA systems notes that it has, quote, massively raised awareness among executives about the variety of work that no longer requires human involvement. He cheerfully declares, we think any business process can be automated, advising corporate bosses that half to 2/3 of all the tasks being done at their companies can be done by machines. This is Jim Hightower saying, conventional corporate wisdom blithely preaches that all new technologies create more jobs than they kill. But even these Pollyannish preachers are now conceding that this robotic automation of white-collar jobs is being imposed so widely, suddenly, and stealthily that losses will crush any gains. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, the House Communications and Technology Subcommittee and the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee got together, held a big hearing on big tech and misinformation on the web. And you go, wow, this... I don't know, 5-6 years too late, but hey, better late than never. Maybe we can stop some of the Russian misinformation and some of the hacking and some of the other stuff next time. Maybe next time. I'm here to share some thoughts on the big subcommittee duo meeting hearing and all the fireworks that went on. I've asked Erin Simpson to come talk with us. She's the Associate Director for Tech Policy at the Center for American Progress, their website, americanprogress.org. Erin, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, so good to be here. I watched these 6 hours, so you don't have to.
Thank goodness. So the barn burner that this was going to be with all of the the smoking guns and all of the really really magnanimous characters, all the personalities, all of that. How'd it go?
Well, Rick, the call is coming from inside the House with election 2020. We were all hyped up about foreign disinformation in 2016. we had a lot of hearings about that. A lot went down. Russia interfered. And this year, it was really a domestic battle. We had so many domestic groups pushing disinformation about the election, about coronavirus and the election, not just leading up, not just during, but then after, right? The post-election period was a disaster. President Trump was delegitimizing the election. People were pushing that online. And then this all culminated on the tragic events of January 6th. We had 5 people lose their lives. You had the QAnon shaman, on the floor in the House. And so today, this was Congress's follow-up, right? And a lot of Congress people and their staff, they were, this was a traumatic experience for them. You had people cowering and hiding, up in the gallery. And so this has been long awaited just because you were finally going to have, members of both committees really coming and with a lot of fire to grill the CEOs of Google, Twitter, and Facebook about why they didn't do more, what happened, what went wrong, and what they're doing now. And so we've had, 17 hearings maybe in the last 3 or 4 years with this sort of group of tech bros. And it, like so many before, was incredibly disappointing. So we had a longer Congress people who, the hearings have gotten better on the Congress's side, right? They are really getting in there. They're talking not just about, say make money. It's let's really get in there and talk about your algorithmic amplification. Let's not just talk about your content moderation. Let's talk about your product design. Let's talk about not just what you take down from other people, but how your algorithms, your product choices are actually spreading itself.
Yep.
And that was a really big shift. And we saw a lot of that today as they tried to sort of, pin these 3 CEOs and try to get concessions and promises for how to do better in the future, because what we're seeing now is just not enough.
No, because the business model is to continue to feed you what you want and feed you the most extreme of, especially if someone's paying to get to your eyeballs. That's their business model. It's not what's most popular per se. It's not what your friends are saying. It's what they're feeding you to keep your eyeballs there, so that when you click on those notifications, they can keep banging you with, "Hey, take a look at me. Take a look at me." It's like a constant drug, and they've. A friend of mine likes to say, Fox News and Facebook have done to our parents, our parents and us, what we were claiming and our parents were claiming video games would do to kids. It's what they've done.
Yeah, it's gotten really bad. And I think some of the last year, we got a lot of great activists who are doing research and a lot of really intrepid journalists who have been really getting on these guys and getting sort of internal documents. And so this is the first time we've really had just such blatant confirmation everywhere that they know their products are radicalizing. Tech Transparency Project shows that Facebook is growing white supremacy. Karen Howe, this great piece at the MIT Tech Review a couple of weeks ago showing that 64% of extremist groups on Facebook, according to their own research, were pointed there by Facebook. And when they found that out, they're like, all right, we got to get this team that's researching this off. We're going to move these teams away. This is going to hurt our bottom line. Yeah. And we hear these stories again and again, right? Wall Street Journal, right before the election, reported that Zuckerberg knew that there were tools they could do to tamp down the disinformation and all the hate content they were seeing in the feeds. But it disproportionately impacted right-wing publishers. And they didn't want to see how it looked.
No, that's an excellent point. Because, I've said for years, we've always had crazy people. We've always had people who wore the tinfoil hats. We've always had people who believed in these wild, bizarre conspiracies. Facebook just gave them the means to find each other and allow them to organize into a much bigger group and have a much more powerful voice than they actually are, which is why, you saw, I don't think it's as big a population as our media likes to throw out there, but they are loud, they are radical, and now they're organized.
Right. Yeah. They're very organized, and this the difference in megaphone, right? I mean, we were worried about the Telegraph and how that was going to, spread wild ideas. This happens every time, but with social media, the scale is unprecedented. The targeting is unprecedented. And, say YouTube is going to hold your hand and walk you down, extremist rabbit holes going deeper and deeper and deeper. And so, it's not just that, we have folks who are going to believe disinformation and misinformation. We have folks who, are pushing disinformation, be that domestic groups or Russia. We also have these companies that are profiting off of all of this and building tools to supercharge this. And it was great to finally see Congress kind of try to get at that. Well, wait a second, you're profiting off of this. What are your tools doing around this? And you could tell that they weren't quite ready to, share more about a lot of those things, right? It's like this black box for them. Our team has been really working on Spanish language disinformation. So this was, longstanding problem, especially on Facebook. And it got worse during 2020, but it got worse even after the election, right? So around coronavirus and around the election, there's been terrible problem about Spanish language disinformation. Some of Facebook's labels, like Spanish language post, English language label about the election. We've still got, militia calls to arms in Spanish that Facebook hasn't taken down, even though us and our partners at the National Hispanic Media Coalition at Free Press, we've been flagging them for months, right? And so we launched Ya Basta Facebook, Enough Facebook, to try to get them to take more action. And, we had a lot of help today from Reps Chakowski, Reps Cardenas, Rep Soto, to really push Zuckerberg specifically on why you're not doing enough about Spanish language disinformation. Because often when they think about this, they think about, Spanish language internationally, right? But, there are 40 million Spanish-speaking people in the United States. We have the second largest Spanish-speaking population in the world, right? And so the idea that there's not cultural competency to understand that there's a specific U.S. Spanish-speaking political context that you need to be in the know, that you need to be translating posts about militias correctly. That's a huge issue for us, and their answers were really disappointing today.
So now I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm thinking about some of my Trump-supporting conservative friends who are going to say you sound conspiratorial. Like there's some invisible hand back there that's controlling all this. There's somebody pulling the strings. That there's some nefarious plot to spread all this misinformation. I'll go first, and I'll say there is. But I'm curious what your thought is.
Well, folks have been spreading disinformation since the days of Napoleon. He would send people ahead of him to say how good he did in battle before he even got there for battle. And today, it's a profitable business. Like, you've got groups that are just in this for the money. The Macedonian teenagers who can put up wild posts, clickbait that gets your attention, and they're making money. You got those groups. You got people doing this politically. I mean, we watched the Proud Boys storm the Capitol with our own eyes, right? Like, are they conspiracying to try to overthrow the government? But sure, they're believing the conspiracy theories. It's a big distributed problem in some ways, right? There's all kinds of different groups, different interest groups. They got their own thing. Maybe you run a blog that spreads disinformation about pregnancy cures, but people just love it, right? Like, pregnancy, holistic, natural things, like stuff that's not based on science. And there's a whole community around that kind of stuff. There's a whole community around anti-vax information. And it's tough, right? Because, you want to approach people with some understanding, right? Because we've all got that person in our lives who maybe, believes something that's just super false, and you're worried about them because of it, right? You're worried that it's going to hurt them. They've gone on the QAnon rabbit hole, maybe. And so, you want to have a lot of grace, right? And try to meet them where they are and understand, why do you believe this in the first place? Because a lot of these people, it's a community feeling, right? Like, people are working together online to, decode QAnon breadcrumbs. There's a lot of community feelings. And so I'm not, in terms of who's doing what, this is a problem in many ways for all of us. But the three people running billion-dollar companies who are profiting off of all of this while the rest of us are trying to figure it out, that's who's on display today. And heck, I would love more data too about what's going on so that we can, make even more empirically driven claims in addition to what we already have.
Yeah. So let me ask you this now. We know we've identified what the problem is, and I think we agree that Facebook's algorithm and the constant being banged with notifications and all of this stuff that's funneling you into a very narrow pathway, obviously to make money off of you. We know that's the problem. How do you fix that? Because people are going to say, hey, Erin, this is the free market. People want that content. The business is providing it for them. Consumers are getting what they want. The business is getting what they want. What's wrong with this? So democracy dies. Capitalism wins.
Oh man, if this is capitalism, this is such a perverted version of the free market. When you've got companies that are monopolies in their own digital markets, and they've been trying to kill off every competitor for years or acquire every competitor for years, right? We don't have the competition. We don't have the choice that we want in social media markets at all. And that's why, you're starting to see some really encouraging signs that regulators are finally embracing those historic roots of antitrust and saying, you know what? Like these are big problems of corporate concentration, not just of economic concentration, but of informational power, of political power. And this is something we need to do something about. So the state attorneys general cases, the DOJ and FTC cases against Google, against Facebook, we've got pending cases against Apple and Amazon, investigations ongoing. Those are really encouraging signs because one part of this, just to say, this is not an inevitable result of the market. Digital markets are prone to tipping, sure, but we've got a lot of evidence already of anti-competitive conduct. And we saw some of that in the great House Antitrust Subcommittee report this summer. And so we know that's ongoing. We're eager for these investigations, but they could take years, right? So what do you do in the interim? Because those outcomes are not sure. We need to be using all the tools available, investigatory, regulatory oversight, whatever we have. Can we investigate dark patterns? Can we compel new data to understand these problems better? Do we need to be thinking about legislative fixes around toxic business models? And I think we do all of those things and more tools, right? We need to be thinking about our government doesn't have all of the tools it needs to be overseeing, understanding, and fixing some of these technical problems either before they're happening or as they're happening, right? Because antitrust, as we've seen, or they're saying now, as we saw with the Microsoft in the early 2000s, 10 years too late.
Yeah, no, you're right on. But to your capitalism point, we disagree a little bit. I think this is exactly what capitalism is. Because, as I learned at capitalism, the big fish always eats the little fish. That's just how it goes. And eventually the end of the road is monopoly. The big fish eating all of the little fish. So that is what unregulated capitalism to me is. I could be wrong, but that's what I think it is. Now, for the government's problem is we're always 10 years behind because they're not allowed to innovate. They're not allowed to keep up with the times, and we don't have the expertise to keep up with these models and this stuff. So how do we go and grab that stuff so that we can keep up with, because the market, this thing's always changing. By the time I figure out what the next social media platform are, there's 3 more I've missed.
Well, our team is working on ideas to help the government catch up, right? And we're going to be publishing some papers this year about how do we make the government capable of doing this ongoing for all online services, not just social media now, but what do we think about emerging technologies? Like, how are we going to get around AI? We don't want to be behind the ball on all of these other things. And so part of it's just the brute force. We need to make regulatory bodies capable, because without democratic oversight of these issues, we're just stuck with whatever market problems are going to naturally arise, right? And so, we need the full set of antitrust changes. We need antitrust enforcers to be aggressive. Some of the Biden picks have been good, so that's optimistic. We need new competition policies, really robust. We need the spirit of antitrust's original purpose. We need to bring that back, right? These are the giants of our time. We got to go get them. And we need to fix the regulatory tools, because if we can't regulate technology, we can't regulate, data products, we can't regulate the future. And so that's just something that, come heads or tails, we just have to figure out.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. But what do you say to the person who then says, well, you're gonna censor what I have to say? I want to say these racist, idiotic things. What do you say to the person who says you're censoring me?
Oh gosh, I mean, the part of the part of the internet that we're arguing about, the social media part where we're having these content moderation battles, that's just the tip of the iceberg for all of the internet companies and technology companies that are really controlling important parts of our economy and our everyday lives. For the folks who are worried about censorship, of course, I'm also worried about censorship. I don't see content moderation that social media companies are doing as that at all. Because sometimes, we get so into, a really flat version of the First Amendment that thinks protecting freedom of expression is just about protecting the most speech, maximal speech, right? But actually, freedom of expression is, you can be silenced by having your speech drowned out. You can be silenced by having your speech harassed. And historically, the powers of the First Amendment have always disproportionately accrued to people in power, right? companies with a lot of money, white people like us, men, like people who aren't harassed as much online, like people of color are disproportionately, left out of those same benefits. And so we need to look at protecting freedom of expression online holistically. And that's not always about maximal speech, because I think even folks who are worried about, say, censorship are worried about that from the government and worried about that from companies, right? They're worried about that from, people shouting them down online. Like, this is a dynamic situation. And now that we're living in this sort of digital online public sphere, we've just got to rethink how is this going to happen? And I think there's so many different ways to do that. Competition's an answer. Better democratic oversight is an answer. We've got a lot of things we need to work on there.
Yeah, see, I've always been, in my view on this is, for the longest time, has been everybody should be who they are online. None of these hiding behind an avatar, none of these making up, false accounts. You are who you are, and you are verified as who you are, and you're responsible for the dumb stuff you say. Because I talk to people all the time. I go, if you were standing in front of me, would you say that to my face? And invariably, nobody's going to say the stuff that they say to each other online, to each other's face, because we just don't do that. I mean, there are some, and you deal with that. But for the most part, the ugliness and the kind of hatred and the kind of vitriol that we see, I think some of it could be solved with, there's no hiding who you are.
Yeah, I take your point about sometimes online we're just so much worse, right? We're the worst version of ourselves. But I'll also say that anonymity online is super important, right? When we think about protecting, journalists or marginalized people or labor organizers who are trying to communicate and not be surveilled by the government or companies, like that anonymity is important sometimes, right? Like actually I think anonymity is cool. So I guess I disagree with you a little bit there, that there's definitely a role for anonymity, and that helps sometimes freedom of expression for people who are persecuted or targeted or can't speak out otherwise. But does it also empower the trolls? You're right. Yes, it does, Rick. Yeah.
No, I come back to, I think you have to hold people accountable for the actions that they take. We can blame, Twitter and Facebook and all that, and they have a lot of blame in this because of their algorithms.
Right.
But some of the hateful, really ugly stuff that you see that maybe they don't take down fast enough or whatnot, the person's just going to spew it again.
Absolutely, right? These are old problems. We were talking to some organizers in Georgia, the New Georgia Project, who, did amazing work around the Georgia election and then the special election. And they said, you know what? Before there was the internet, they put billboards in our communities, in Black communities, with the wrong day to vote on it, right? Like, no matter the means, no matter the method, like, people who want to do bad things are going to figure it out.
That's an excellent point. For more information, where can folks go to find out what happened today and where we need to be going? Any place in particular?
Oh, we're AmericanProgress.org. We're putting out a statement on it. We put a great Spanish disinformation action plan out with Free Press and the National Hispanic Media Coalition. So you can find that on our website, and I'll go ahead and tweet it at the show as well.
Good stuff, and we'll make sure that we get it out on our social media platforms. Erin, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
I appreciate you, Rick. Keep on keeping on.
Good stuff. Appreciate the time. Erin Simpson, Associate Director of Tech Policy there at the Center for American Progress. The website, make sure you check that out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1947. That was the day Centralia Coal Mine Number 5 exploded, killing 111 miners in Centralia, Illinois. The explosion occurred just as the day shift was ending. Those not killed instantly were trapped and died from their burns or the afterdamp. Words scrawled on the wall of the mine read, "Look in our pockets. We all have notes. Please give them to our wives." State inspectors had been forewarning mine owners about the dangers of accumulated combustible coal dust for years before the explosion, but were ignored. Illinois mine inspector Driscoll Scanlon had been filing reports since 1942 about deteriorating conditions. The demand for coal during wartime had increased production at the expense of safety. In the aftermath of the explosion, John L. Lewis, president of the United Mine Workers of America, called a work stoppage in memory of the dead miners. He also held Secretary of the Interior Julius Krug guilty of criminal negligence. Lewis accused Krug of having failed to enforce existing mine regulations. In response, Krug ordered that 518 mines remain closed for inspection. The House and Senate proceeded to organize hearings on mine safety. They demanded that the Bureau of Mines continue to pass inspection findings on to the proper state agencies. Given the power mine owners had at the state level, these instructions ensured no improvements in mine safety would occur. It would be another 22 years before any real change occurred at the federal level.
It happened an hour ago, way down in this tunnel of coal. The gas caught fire from somebody's lamp, and the miners are choking in smoke.
Labor History on 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
According to the Center for Countering Digital Hate, yes, there is actually a center for countering digital hate because there's so much of it out there. But according to them, just 12 people. This just blew my mind when I read this. Just 12 people that they've labeled the disinformation dozen are responsible for 73% of all the anti-vax content found on Facebook. 73% of the disinformation from just 12 people. Now, this is exactly what I think Erin was talking about. The reality is that a handful of people have the ability to disseminate, all kinds of bad information, and Facebook's algorithm will funnel it to each of us. It's really quite remarkable in that, seriously, it's really quite remarkable. We just had someone walk into the studio, hey, it is what it is. But 73% of this, it's incredible that they have that kind of reach. Now, understand, the big anti-vaxxer was Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who, and I remember this going back, over a decade. With the Tamarosol and the, causing autism and, the sky is falling and all this. And look, I remember going to my doctor because I trust my doctor, which again, I think all of us should have a relationship with a family doctor that we trust so that you can go and you go, is this crazy? And he said, look, the reality is vaccines are safe. They haven't used Tamarosol in vaccines for years. Don't know what he's talking about. This is what's in the vaccines that you've given your kids. They're very safe. Now, are there potential for side effects? Yes. Everything that you put into your body will have a side effect. The cheeseburger that you got from the fast food place, going to have a side effect from possibly something in it that you're allergic to. That is going to happen. Do these vaccines save more lives? Yeah, it's a matter of sheer numbers. Are you going to have a better outcome by not getting sick and not getting infected? Yes, and that's the reason that you do this. Will there be a handful of people who have negative effects? Yes, there are. In fact, I have a friend whose sister had a negative effect from a very severe negative outcome with a vaccine. And I said, so you're an anti-vaxxer? He goes, no, it's stupid. He goes, my sister had was one of the unlucky ones. But for the millions of people and the lives that it saves, you absolutely. In fact, he got his own kids vaccinated. And it's just one of these moments where you go, there's always a kernel of truth in what they throw out. And then they take it to the extreme. And that's my problem with a lot of these groups. That, it's like, they've got one tool in the box. Everything's a hammer and they got to smash everything with it. But the fact that Facebook has that kind of reach, and that such a small number of people can be led to that kind of content, is kind of scary. Because I think a lot of people think Facebook works like I used to think. You put something out, the people who are your friends get to see it. That's not how it is. It is funneled to people who want to see certain things. There's content always thrown at you. It's really kind of scary. The other thing is I'll Google something, and for the next week, that's all I see. Because it's all about making money. Now, this is the key part to all social media. And this is what I've tried to tell my kids. You're not paying for it. So that means you're not the consumer. That means you're the product. The fact that you're getting it for free means that somewhere they have to make money off of this. They have to figure out how to provide this service to you for free. So what your price of admission is all of your information, all of your data, and all of the things that you might buy. That's the product. You are the byproduct of the service. You're where they get money from eventually. Now, is there a possibility of creating an environment where you pay for the social media? I don't know. I doubt it, because we're used to being suckered into this. We're used to being, advertised to constantly. But that's a huge number. 73% of everything on Facebook that has any anti-vax from 12 people. Amazing stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney going to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Right back.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
It's not really recyclable. And that means that it ends up in landfills or burnt or in the ocean, where it breaks down into microplastics, gets eaten by fish, and can end up inside us.
Plastic pollution increasingly found in oceans, farm soils, and the food chain. The fossil fuel industry receives more than $60 billion a year in indirect federal subsidies, study finds. Oil firms knew decades ago fossil fuels caused deadly air pollution and then lied about it. Plus, one tanker mishap causes global oil price spike.
All of those mishaps and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The reason I am so happy is that science is back.
Yay, science is back. Come for the bad jokes, stay for the good science. This is your Green News Report. Okie dokie, speaking of good science, hello Desi Doyen.
Hey.
We start off today with a worldwide oil price spike because of one lousy ship. Really?
Yes. Global oil prices spiked temporarily after a massive container ship ran aground in the Suez Canal in the Middle East on Wednesday, halting all traffic in one of the world's busiest waterways. It's your daily reminder that solar and wind energy cannot be disrupted by a single poorly navigated ship halfway across the world.
Yeah, but it can be disrupted by nightfall.
That's what batteries are for.
Oh, Good point. See? Good science.
Meanwhile, a new study has estimated just how much the U.S. fossil fuel industry receives in government subsidies. Now, direct subsidies, like tax breaks, are estimated to be up to about $50 billion a year. But researchers at Yale University estimate that indirect subsidies are far higher and allow fossil fuel companies to offload onto society the full, true costs of their products. Costs like pollution, public health damages, and climate change, known as externalities. Between 2010 and 2018, the study estimates the value of these indirect, implicit subsidies to the U.S. fossil fuel industry averaged about $62 billion every year.
Really? And yet we're just so broke, apparently, according to Republicans, that they can't afford to give any money to the solar and wind industry.
The Guardian reports that a new treasure trove of internal documents shows that oil companies knew decades ago that burning their product caused deadly, toxic air pollution.
Of course. What do you think we give them all that money for?
But like the tobacco industry, the documents show oil companies spent millions to generate uncertainty about the effects of their toxic air pollution, denying the fact that their products posed grave risks to public health, and spent millions lobbying to block clean air rules.
I wonder where they got all that money.
But as the world begins to shift away from fossil fuels, the oil and gas industry is pushing to flood the world with more plastics made from oil and gas in order to maintain their profits. And that would increase plastic pollution. A series of alarming studies reveal that plastic pollution is entering the food chain. UC Santa Barbara scientist Roland Geyer explains in an interview with CBS.
Plastic in the ocean has a tendency to break down into ever smaller pieces. And these tiny pieces then get taken up even lower down in the food chain. So we know that it ends up on our dinner plates. There is plastic in your food, plastic in your sea salt, and there is plastic coming out of your tap.
Delicious.
And it's not just entering and rising up the ocean food chain. A new study has concluded that teeny tiny microplastics are even contaminating agricultural soils on land. The researchers were surprised to find that tiny plastic particles were small enough to pass through the physical barriers of intact plant tissue, negatively impacting plant development and could be ending up in produce and people. They estimate that more microplastics are contaminating farm soils than oceans. In the U.S., Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon introduced the comprehensive Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act to reduce plastic pollution and address the entire life cycle of plastics. The bill also prioritizes environmental justice because most plastic manufacturing plants are, surprise, located in communities of color, like a massive new plastic plant now being proposed in a primarily black community in Louisiana known as Cancer Alley because of the high incidence of cancer. HBO's John Oliver did an epic report on plastic pollution in his show Last Week Tonight, exposing how the plastic packaging industry and the oil industry lobbied to put the burden on consumers to dispose of plastic waste rather than the producers of plastic waste. But it turns out that the vast majority of plastic packaging cannot be recycled. We'll link to that video at our website, greennews.bradblog.com. Plastic pollution is another way that the oil industry is trying to force consumers, governments, and taxpayers to bear the oil industry's burden of the waste and pollution they generate. Effectively, another subsidy for the fossil fuel industry. Nice work if you can get it.
Indeed. For much more on that story and all of the other things we couldn't cover today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is a horrible story coming out of Austin, Texas. Evidently, the officials down in Texas said today that the death toll from the winter storm and blackout has taken at least 111 people's lives, nearly double what the state initially said. This is, I guess, one of the worst power outages in the history of our country. And I got to wonder if they're going to do anything about it, if anyone's going to be held accountable. and responsible for those at least 111 lives that were lost because, well, we couldn't figure out how to not let things freeze up. Just crazy stuff. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big press conference today. I've asked our good friend Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, did you happen to see the big presser today?
Yes, I thought it went pretty good. I really did. I mean, of course, I saw some people picking apart there were, quote, cheat sheets. Well, every president has notes. So let's get past that right now, okay?
Except Trump.
Well, and he needed notes. But just to keep him on track. But, President Biden's been around, as you know. He's, been in the Senate. He was vice president. So, but everybody was, all eyes on it. And he set basically today, he set the hierarchy of, where he wants to be on certain issues. And obviously talked about the push to rebuild the roads, the bridges, and the technology. He made that out front and out, in the open that he was going to definitely do everything he could do that. And then, of course, the vaccines. He talked about that. Now, he was not as pinpointed detail-wise for time frames when it came to the topics of guns and immigration. He called them long-term problems, and I don't think he wanted today, to throw out some, here's the solution, and this is what we can do in the next 2 weeks. Some people are taking that as that those issues are taking a back seat, but I think, look, he's been in less than 90 days, so he's got to see where the Congress itself is going with these issues also.
Yeah. Predictably, the RNC came out and said that, quote, Biden showed a weak display of leadership and has no plan or sense of urgency to address the multiple crises he has created for our country. He's been president for, 64 days now?
Right.
We just got out of 4 years of disaster, and the RNC says, look at all these problems he's created in these 64 days.
Well, I mean, they're going to, of course, come out with those types of statements, but, the fact remains right now the public are focused on, obviously, a lot of issues, and there are people that have personal issues that they really care about if you rank them from 1 to 10. But in general, obviously, COVID, which he addressed, the infrastructure is getting a lot of reception out there, and then he's going to have an economic bill and an economic plan, which is going to be, large. And I think those are the things he highlighted, directly and highlighted first, and frankly, appropriately highlighted first. I mean, look, if he opened that press conference saying, okay, here's immigration, then he takes that issue to the forefront above everything else, that's out there. And again, that's more of a long-term problem. So I think he highlighted what he needed to highlight and what's the concern of people, especially starting out with the vaccinations and the COVID.
Yeah, no, do you find it interesting that nobody asked a question about COVID?
I do. I don't get it. I don't know why, but
because he's doing a good job. There's no gotcha there. He's actually doing a good job.
Usually you get at least like one question. Okay, what's phase? Mr. President, what's phase 2 after this? You know how the press can be, but it didn't happen. So,
but they did ask the most important question. 64 days into his term, are you running for re-election?
Oh, I know. That was the if you read some of the stories, the headlines were basically Biden announces re-election. That he will be running and he will have Vice President Kamala Harris with him.
And that's not what he said. He was like, I don't know. I can't tell you what I'm going to be doing.
Right.
He said, I would expect.
Biden announces re-election was the premise.
Which is crazy. I mean, and look, this Nancy Cortez, the CBS reporter who asked this question, who, I can't imagine she got up today, got dressed, did her makeup, did everything, got to the White House, went through all of the security. This is the big day. I've been waiting for 64 days to ask my question. And that's the stupid nonsense she comes out with. If CBS News has a garden section, that's where they should put her from now on.
I mean, look, don't you think she should have it would have served her better probably with more theater to have just said, by the way, Mr. President, there's all these rumors out here and conspiracy theories. So can you tell us now, are you going to step aside by June and let the vice president become president. You know, she'd have done herself better to have just done that.
Yep.
Right.
So do you think that's where that was going?
Oh, I'm trying to think what would be the nature, because you make a great point, you know, with 60-some days, what would be the nature of that question? And she, you know, hinted around in an extremely vague sense. I think she was out there because, you know, you hear these conspiracy theories. I've heard them all over the place that, you know, by June, or some say May, or it's not going to, by Christmas, you know, he's got it all planned to step down. And I think that's part of what she was throwing out there to get some type of dramatic effect.
Yeah, this is like all the extreme religious people saying, you know, if you remember back during the 80s and 90s, it was, you know, every year was going to be the end of the world, and the rapture was coming, and we were, you know, there were people standing on the street corners, the end is near, and they were predicting, and their dates would pass. No, well, it's tomorrow, and this is kind of one of those things. I mean, every day is going to be, are you resigning today? Are you resigning today?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Crazy. We live in crazy times. And look, the reality is the RNC's right. There's a lot of crisis. Biden didn't create them, but he's got to clean them up. And you know, I'll be okay. I was okay with today's press conference. Did he look a little out of sorts sometimes? Because you could see the wheels turning. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to say something stupid. I don't want to stutter. I don't want to, you know, I see that. If I'm him, I'm not doing many of these. Right.
Well, I don't think it would serve anyone's purposes in the White House for the president to just make these so regular and routine. I mean, they don't have to be absent, but to make them regular and routine would not serve the White House for its agenda. Yeah,
just get up every day, do your job, move this country in the right direction. Let's get something passed. And let's go forward. I wanted to get your thoughts on Georgia. Evidently, Georgia has passed, this Senate Bill 202, which is, I guess, you know, as everyone's saying, and I agree, taking us back to the good old days of Jim Crow. Curious your thoughts on what the state of Georgia did today.
Well, it takes it to the point where you can't bring food or water to voters in line.
No, you can't give anything away. No more food or water online.
Food or water. If they need to pass out, they pass out. You know, if it's too cold, it's too cold. It doesn't matter, you know. It's Georgia, though. It's hot.
Yeah. Can I give someone next to me a piece of chewing gum?
Right. No, you can't. You can't give anything.
I'm going to jail for chewing gum.
That was so ridiculous that they put that in there, you know. But they're calling, you know, the governor, Brian Kemp, called it common sense legislation. And, of course, all the focus was on Georgia because former President Trump, you know, without any basis, claimed that the election was stolen in Georgia. And so this is the quote, reaction to it. And what's interesting about it, what did they base it on? I mean, what statistics did they bring forth? What did they say were the reasons that they had to do this? You know, they didn't.
They didn't. There were none.
Right. Exactly.
And then you put that, the fact that they had no facts, and they were basically basing everything off of what the Trump legal team, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, were running around screaming about. And, you know, Sidney Powell right now is saying, you know, my comments were so outrageous, who could possibly believe them? Well, evidently the Georgia legislature.
Well, yes, and also talk about power. This law allows the state legislature to appoint the chair of the state election board. Now, before, that was the board was chaired by the Secretary of State. And, of course, that's the Secretary of State that sparred with Trump, as we all know. So the bill also allows the state election board to take over county election administration. So they're centralizing that power up to the legislature. It'll require mail-in voters to include their driver's license numbers or other documentation to verify their identity instead of their signature verification, which is what, you know, used to be used.
Yeah.
Also, drop boxes can only be located inside election offices and early voting locations, and they're going to curb that, you know, the usefulness of having those drop boxes, obviously. And it shortens the window for requesting your absentee ballot, which is amazing to me. Shortens the window to request an absentee ballot. Why would you not want the window longer? Because when you got the window longer, guess what? You can actually analyze that ballot for fraud a lot better.
Yeah, but we don't want people getting absentee ballots, and we don't want them sending them in, and we don't want those people voting.
Right, right.
I mean, that's the only thing I can come up with. And the fact, look, the fact that they went and they took the state election board away from the Secretary of State tells me that they plan on losing elections in the future on a statewide basis. Because Georgia is turning into a blue state, and they're going to use the legislature's gerrymandering to hold on to as much electoral power as they can.
Right, and obviously, one positive side to doing this is it's probably going to probably bring about some action on the federal level.
Yep.
To look at what they're doing, because it's going to be an example. Some states will try to do the same type of thing also. So as far as the new legislation is coming out of the House about elections, this may actually work to the advantage of the Congress to say, wait a minute, what are they doing? This is going to get widespread. We need to take a look at it.
That's exactly what I said at the beginning. I said maybe this is a gift in disguise, because maybe now the federal government is going to have to respond, because you have a southern state returning to the same kind of Jim Crow things that the Supreme Court said you can't have, and that the Supreme Court said, no, we don't have these problems anymore. Well, hello, Houston, or hello, Atlanta, we got a problem.
Well, and they're doing it based on something that didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Something that was said that it happened, but it didn't happen. So that's the first thing I thought today was, well, it might help with the federal legislation by them doing this.
Yeah, and the thing is there are a lot of states, how many were there? 21 states going through a lot of these same bits of legislation to try and Pennsylvania's got banging around in our legislature.
Well, right, and there's also the Republican Conference of State Legislators, which you have a Democrat, option on that too. The National Conference of State Legislatures, and having served, in the Ohio legislature, what happens too? These are transmitted to other states. They become popular items. Well, Georgia did it. We've now got to do it. So this is something that could domino across states. And again, I just think it will give more rise for the discussion to occur in Congress about, voters' rights and opening up voting.
We'll see where it takes us. But again, I hope this is a moment where you start talking about the filibuster and if we're going to get anything done. I wanted to get your thoughts on Hunter Biden. I had a listener send me a Guardian story that evidently Hunter Biden's wife threw his gun in a garbage can, and it got found by a homeless guy, and there's a whole to-do, and the Secret Service got involved. Hunter Biden just provides so much entertainment.
Well, right. The Secret Service actually put itself into this case, I guess, right? She took the gun, threw the trash can behind a grocery store, and came back after that and found it to be gone. So now the police, of course, were investigating where the trash can was. Was it near a school? What was the missing gun used for? And then Secret Service agents stepped in to approach the owner of the store where Hunter bought the gun and to look at the paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is another reason why we need to have major, we need to have gun legislation for the part that, I think it should be a crime to throw it away.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just can't toss out a gun. And you're not supposed to.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. We've got too many guns, and to have people just throwing them away just seems really stupid.
Now, the other thing, though, Rick, here, the gun store owner is saying that he thought the Secret Service wanted to hide Hunter Biden's ownership of this missing gun, but the Secret Service says it has no record of the agents investigating the incident.
So do you think that this is a made-up story? Do you think the Secret Service because I read through it and I'm like, I don't know that the Secret Service, who Biden didn't have, I guess, protection at the time, or Hunter Biden didn't either. I don't know why they would have been involved at any level.
Well, I don't think they were. The original story, of course, was in October of 2018, and that's when they're saying the Secret Service went to the gun owner's store. And if they did, I don't see why they wouldn't say, yes, we checked it out. they're saying, no, we didn't do it.
Yeah.
So, just like the gun owner was talking about, Secret Service came in, just like the guy that said the laptop was coming in, but where is the laptop,
Yeah, because that's the first thing I thought of when I was reading. Are we now going to start finding guns all over the place?
Right. So I was trying to follow this story, but again, I think if the Secret Service was involved, because I'm not sure they would be anyway. Wouldn't it be, the firearms, federal?
ATF.
Yeah, ATF. Why would it not be the ATF instead of Secret Service?
Yeah, but I think the story here was what we're supposed to be led to, and they're leading us to the water to drink, is that there's a cover-up. And it's at the highest levels, and it's it's Biden.
Somebody used a gun to do something.
Yeah, there's all somebody's going to come, and that gun was assassinated somebody, and some people have got a vivid imagination.
And then I'm wondering if she took the gun, and then she did go throw it, why? And she went back to get it. Why would she tell that?
Yeah.
I was trying to read through the story, and it's very confusing.
It's confusing. And look, if you're going to throw a gun away, haven't you watched enough TV? You go to the bridge, you throw it in the water.
Right, in the river, not in the trash can behind a grocery store, and then you tell everybody about it.
Yeah,
right?
See, that's why none of this makes sense to me.
No, it doesn't.
And finally, speaking of guns, the murderer in Boulder evidently was going to be held without bail. I saw that in the headline: Boulder shooting suspect will be held without bail, and I'm going. And there was a chance.
What a turn! I thought they were going to let him out on his own recognizance.
That's just again just crazy reporting. The guy's never going to see the light of day again.
Every major news source today came out with the same thing: suspect to be held without bail. Judge rules. I mean, they made that. Every single banner had that.
I know, and that's why I brought it up, because I'm going, and the point? Mm-hmm. The shocking headline would have been, he somehow got bail.
Right, exactly. Or that he was going to get bail, and the judge reversed it.
Yeah, I mean...
I thought that was weird today.
Just a strange day, and strange times. Anyway, Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Thank you.
Seriously, I mean, I saw this headline, and like Bob said, it was everywhere. Boulder shooting suspect will be held without bail. And I'm like, no, blank. What did you expect? And because immediately my mind went into this weird place of he looks like a white guy, and maybe that you get away with. Maybe that, not even that. And I hope he spends a very long time in jail. And as I've said in the past, I'm not someone who believes in the death penalty. I do believe in people, paying every minute of their time for the crimes that they commit, and he should be sitting right there for all of eternity. And finally, sad day. Jessica Walter passed away. For those who are Arrested Development fans, she was Lucille Bluth, the mother of the family, and I loved Arrested Development, and she was 80 years old. So there was that. She worked over 6 decades. She was in acting for over 60 years. Amazing stuff. Over the next couple of days, I'm expecting more fun. Friday dump. Can't wait to see what comes out of our news media. Maybe more questions about if Joe Biden's going to run for president again. Which outside of that was probably the dumbest thing of the day. I mean, even dumber than the Boulder shooter being held without bail. Can you imagine going back to your boss and going, yeah, I got to ask the president a question today. Oh, yeah, what'd you ask? If he's going to run for re-election. Now, Bob's probably right. Probably, she could have asked that question in a little bit different way. To say that, hey, are you really gonna, you really gonna give it up? You're really gonna retire? You're really gonna resign? You're ready to have that stroke everyone thinks you're gonna have? Something. But no, it wasn't any of that. But it's been really just a bizarre week, in that I think about all of the right-wing memes that have come out, our RNC, basically laying at Biden's feet all of the problems of the last 40 years. Just strange times. And this is just one of those things where I'm looking at Biden, and he's just doing the work. Because like I said at the beginning, the fact that he came out and he said, look, for far too long, working people have been getting screwed. For far too long, they've been getting the short end of the stick, and we're going to change that. And the fact that, he again reiterated, we're going to strengthen the middle class, and unions are going to be the leader of that. Workers being able to organize and fight for better wages, hours, and conditions, going to be able to do that. I mean, I look at how much money Amazon is spending. It's incredible how much money Amazon is spending to fight back that campaign in Bessemer, Alabama, because they know if they lose that campaign in Alabama, it will be like a wildfire across this country of people organizing because they see it can be done. That's why, again, I'm looking forward to the end of the month to see what the election brings us. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.